Hey Internet, Harris here. This year there are two interesting facts about the iPad lineup. One, for the first time ever, every iPad lacks a home button, which is to say they all have this semi full screen modern design. They're all up to date, they're all on more or less the same design language. Secondly, the cheapest iPad or the budget iPad is now pretty much only lacking in quality and not quantity, which is to say it has pretty much all the same features and compatibility as the $1,000 iPad Pro, from the Apple Pencil to USB-C to a really good first-party keyboard option. If you're looking for the same general experience, maybe without just some of the speed and polish, you're going to be able to get that from the cheapest iPad. But I specifically want to look at the iPad if you wanted to get both a keyboard case and some type of stylus. So if you wanted to kind of go the full 9 yards with your iPad experience, that's what I want to look at. And to do that with the iPad Pro and their new really nice keyboard and the Apple Pencil Pro, you're looking at over $1,400 before tax. Whereas with the iPad 10th gen, you're already starting at 1/3 the price. And then the Apple Pencil is a little bit cheaper. And really, if you wanted to get the third-party pencil, which you could do with the iPad Pro too, but you could spend as little as $25 for one of these third-party pencils, which might actually make sense for you. And then if you want Apple's first-party keyboard, that's a really good option. It's already cheaper than the iPad Pro's keyboard. Or if you want to go for the Logitech option, that's even cheaper. And finally, if you wanted to go for a keyboard from someone like ESR, which is the sponsor of this episode, that is under $100. So there's several options for getting this iPad fully decked out with a keyboard and a pencil for fewer than $600. And that's why I like this comparison, is because for less than the iPad Air even starts at, and much less than the iPad Pro starts out, you can get this iPad 10th gen with a good keyboard and a stylus. Yeah. So let's talk about hardware. So there is a subtle difference in design. Now they're both beautiful, and I would actually say the iPad 10th gen looks better. It has really nice color options that are much bolder and flashier than the iPad Pro, which just comes in, good but kind of boring, silver and gray. They're both aluminum. They both look really good. The iPad Pro now is super thin, whereas this has more of the shell of the iPad Air. Still very thin, very impressive. Not a big deal. Now, if there is one big difference that I do notice having used both of them, it would be the difference between the ProMotion 120 hertz refresh display and laminated display. The iPad Pro and the iPad Air both have laminated displays, which means that basically the glass and the actual display are merged or fused, which means there's no gap when you're putting down your Apple Pencil or your finger between what you're interacting with and what's showing up. In a nutshell, this iPad does have that slight gap, which makes it feel slightly hollow and slightly less responsive, just because there's that just really, really tiny gap between the actual glass and the display underneath. And it's one of those things that really, ignorance is bliss. If you haven't used an iPad Pro extensively or an iPad Air extensively, you probably wouldn't pick up on that difference, but it is there nonetheless. This also plays into how speedy the operating system feels. With a 120 hertz display, it feels quicker and snappier than a display that, even if it had the same M4 processor as the M4 iPad Pro, it would just feel a little slower if it didn't have the 120 hertz display, because it's just not as snappy and responsive when you're operating the OS. But in terms of what you can actually do for student purposes, the hardware and the speed, this iPad at 350 bucks is going to be able to give you pretty much everything you need still, and most people wouldn't even be able to begin to touch the M4 Pro performance. Secondly, there's the difference of the Apple Pencil. So unfortunately, the budget iPad does not support the Apple Pencil 2 or the Apple Pencil Pro. You're either going to have to stick with Apple's first generation Apple Pencil, which is fine, but not magnetic and doesn't charge magnetically either. You get something like Apple's USB-C one, which does attach magnetically, which is nice, but doesn't charge magnetically. You still have to plug it in. You get something like Logitech's Crayon, which is a bit cheaper as well. Or if you really just wanted to go all in an affordable and enjoyable experience, you could get something like this ESR stylus for 30 bucks, which still does attach magnetically and pretty much operates the same way an Apple Pencil would. It just lacks some of the tilt sensitivity. And comparing something like the $30 stylus and the $100 Apple Pencil, this probably has 98% of the overall experience. It just lacks a couple things here and there. So I probably would, especially if you're trying to go on just really all out for saving money, I think something like a $25 stylus from ESR is worth it. And ESR is the sponsor of this episode, but even if they weren't the sponsor, I would be saying the same thing because I really am a fan of their cases, their accessories, and something like their stylus. My favorite case is their very simple rebound magnetic case, which fits like a glove, is super thin, and gives you that protection and different stand angles for watching content or using your Apple Pencil. They also offer a really cool kind of origami magnetic case for tons of viewing angles and lots of protection. And they also have their Rebound Series magnetic keyboard case, which allows you to detach the case and the iPad from the keyboard and then put it back on. So lots of options. I'll leave a link down in the description if you want to check out anything from ESR. And lastly, the USB-C port, there is a difference on the iPad Pro. It's Thunderbolt 4 versus on the iPad 10th gen, it is only USB-C. If you don't know the difference between those, you probably wouldn't even notice in the day-to-day experience. It basically just means that you're not going to be able to transfer as much as quickly as the iPad Pro and power as impressive or intense workflows. But for most people, I think the iPad with its USB-C would be totally fine with all the benefits of USB-C, reversible charging, charging other accessories like charging your Apple Watch or your iPhone from it, as well as connecting USB dongles or connecting to monitors. You can do all of that without really any issues on this iPad 10th gen. And while I did mention performance earlier, like I said, the lack of the ProMotion or 120 hertz display is going to give you experientially maybe less snappy experience than the iPad Pro. But in terms of what's actually being performed and your note taking and your YouTube watching and all that kind of stuff, day to day, it's still going to be very good. Definitely slower, but still very good. One issue I think would just be RAM. So when you're web browsing and switching between tabs, for instance, it's going to be refreshing that page more on the iPad 10th gen because it has less RAM and can't keep as many things up to date at the same time as the iPad Pro can. In terms of storage, this starts at 64 gigs, which I actually don't think is a problem. I have so much stuff in the cloud anyway, not a whole lot saved to my devices. And the biggest app I have is Notability, and that uses less than a gigabyte with tons and tons of notes. So I think 64 gigs would be fine as long as you kind of manage your photos, your messages, your downloaded content effectively. Now, one small difference to note is that this iPad 10th gen does not have a flash. So if you're someone who scans documents a lot, you're going to want to look for places with good lighting because this document scanner is not as good without the flash to be able to light up those shadows. But even this iPad with their new kind of AI document scanning feature, I found the scans aren't anything to write home about. They're fine, they're standard. Maybe you just want to use your iPhone or whatever phone you have, make the scans and send it to the iPad anyway. That might just be more effective overall. So this iPad 10th gen is really compelling because it has the same type of really solid first party keyboard case. It has the landscape camera on the front. It has the modern design language, it has really nice colors. It supports the Apple Pencil, although I just wish it did support the second gen, but that's one compromise. It really just has everything that a student would need for note taking, for YouTube watching, for Kindle reading, document scanning, all the type of stuff it supports. And I think overall, it's a really compelling device. I think the iPad Pro is an amazing device, but I think the price is just really hard to justify it. So I'd probably go somewhere between the iPad 10th gen and the iPad Air if you are a student. If you want to see a video between the Air and the 10th gen, let me know. But yeah, just wanted to make this comparison between these two really differently priced devices and show just how similar they are in actual experience. Let me know if you have any questions, and thanks so much for watching.